We've put a tribute together for you and, of course, for your fans all over the world. Goodness knows you did it your way, Roddy Piper.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the special WGSTV and HWR special report. I am your hardcore host, Rick Head, and, of course, I got some people here who would like to talk about the passing of a great legend. Roddy Piper died today at the age of 61. Before we get going, let's introduce the panel. He is the host of WGSTV. He is the WrestleGamer, Billy Boudreaux. Billy, how we doing?
I believe the entire wrestling industry, along with the fans, are right now just in a state of shock as the news of the passing of Roddy Piper, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, we were floored myself, and of course, he is the classic wrestling manager, Joseph Knight. Joe, how are we doing tonight?
It's, you know what? This is a guy that I actually met in Madison Square Garden, and, you know, it just took me by surprise because Roddy wasn't that old. It's just a shocker that, you know, he's passing. That charisma, that attitude, that rebel ways, I met it that night, and I'll never forget it. Roddy, may God bless you. May he guide you through.
Yeah, absolutely. And, of course, last but not least, we have the incomparable Lance Moss from youtube.com/Lance Moss TV. Lance, how are we doing?
I'm just in shock. It seems like only a couple of weeks ago we were talking about Dusty, and now we lose another one of the greatest on the mics of all time. Oh, my God.
Yeah, and me and Billy were talking about this before we went on the air, and Roddy had a real battle with cancer, which he, gotten over a few years ago, or he was at least clean from cancer, free from cancer for several years, but he also had to do major chemotherapy, and we believe that that's probably what put strain on his heart. Am I correct, Billy?
Yes, definitely, but there's also one thing that we really need to stress, that we're only reiterating what reports are saying. There's not been a definitive causal death yet to be announced. A lot of people are putting in reports out there that it was cardiac arrest, but until an autopsy and a cause of death is announced, a lot of people are just like saying it's cardiac arrest. And cardiac arrest would fit into the scenario of the chemotherapy weakening the body, weakening the heart, and it really would be the most likely cause of death of Roderick Toombs, a.k.a. Roddy Piper.
And, Roddy Piper, even though he never made the world champion, he was definitely still considered one of the best. I remember, one of the things I remember the most from about Roddy Piper, of course, was when he feuded with Hulk Hogan and Mr. T at WrestleMania 1 and 2. He was pretty much one of the biggest thorns in Hulk Hogan's side in his heyday.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I was there as a young teen to see both the war to settle the score in Madison Square Garden and WrestleMania 1. And, wow, I mean, those matches were incredible. I think Roddy's best days were in the WWF of the 80s.
Yeah, absolutely. I also, one of the other things that I remember definitive is where he went on to do that great movie, They Live. And Lance, you and I, we both talked about that great movie. And, of course, one of the famous comments that will forever, linger in my mind is, I am here to kick ass and chew bubblegum, and I'm all out of bubblegum.
Almost definitely. I mean, this is one, as they say, you lose it somewhere down the line. Piper never lost it. I mean, let's face it, even when he worked in TNA, he even got into Vince Russo's ass on camera over the Owen Hart passing. And I can send you, and you know what, Rick? The link will be in the description because I'll send you the link when I find that thing. Piper was always Piper, like he always said. Whenever you think you have the answers, he changed the questions.
But he most certainly does, and I remember vaguely when he went over to WCW. But to be honest with you, his time in WWE was probably the most memorable and certainly the most legendary. I even think he was even in TNA very, very briefly, if I'm not mistaken, Joe.
Yeah, everybody makes that mistake and goes into TNA. But when Roddy showed up, he gave that, no matter what, he gave 200%. we're talking about rivalries before, and you were talking about him and Hulk Hogan. Him and Jimmy Snuka was another incredible one.
Absolutely.
And, if you want to list Roddy's best, stuff, we could go on the whole night, but I got to say just two. The coconut incident with Jimmy Snuka, and the second one, the shaving of little Haiti kid's hair to make him into little Mr. T. I think that was two moments that I'll never forget of Piper's Pit.
Yeah, and of course, he is a WWE Hall of Famer. The only title that he really did win, if I'm not mistaken, was the WWF Intercontinental Champion. Billy, am I correct? Did he win any other titles?
Not as far as I can recollect, but you made a statement earlier I just want to quickly address. You said that this man never achieved being a world champion, and I feel that, if you're as good as Roddy Piper was, then you don't need to be a world champion. I think it's just like something to put like as an asterisk under a person's name that this person was a world champion. And to me, I think being a champion in the wrestling industry doesn't have the same standard it would have like in an MMA or boxing or any other sport that you can think of. Because personally, in my mind, Roddy Piper owned that industry. Whatever he did, he owned it. He did it the best. He's the standard bearer for interview segments. There will never be another Piper's Pit. There may be knockoffs, and other interview segments that try to, imitate Piper's Pit, but there will never, and I repeat, there will never be another interview segment that brought as much controversy and as much entertainment as Roddy Piper with Piper's Pit.
I absolutely agree with you. And again, when I was saying that he never won the title, I was not saying that as something against him, because obviously people like Roddy Piper doesn't need that belt. He is a champion in his own right. He was like I said, he took Hulk Hogan to the limit so many times. I don't think Hulk Hogan ever beat him. I think he even said that one time in WCW that you'd never beat me, and even the commentators was like, that's true. And that was, of course, when Hulk Hogan was heel in NWO. We were all in shock because no matter where Roddy goes, always sets the standard, and he always is a highlight of that show.
I wanted to say that what they did with Hogan and Piper in WCW, to my recollection, would probably be the first feud ever to transcend promotions from WWF to WCW, and I believe that was the first time that they ever did something, to that extent. And I know a lot of people, and I'm already thinking in my mind there would be another rivalry, and that would be Hogan and Flair, but when Flair had his initial run in WWF. But I think the more memorable one is Hogan and Piper, and it's not to discredit Ric Flair in any form or any facet, but he and Flair never really worked a lot together. But Hogan and Piper really did work a lot, especially in the 80s leading into the 90s.
Yeah, and, they just had that chemistry. And, Roddy Piper, even if he was not the best technical wrestler, the mic skills and his personality and his persona just transcended right over it. Joe, if you could really remember one classic match or a classic feud aside from Hulk Hogan or the Mr. T, which one would it be offhand?
Oh, forgetting. You have to look at him and Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff matches right after when Piper and Orton dumped Orndorff after WrestleMania. The first match they ever had was at Saturday Night's Main Event, and it was all over the place. And again, Roddy wasn't a technical guy. Roddy was that slug in the face type of guy, punch and kick guy. But it was his mouth that just made that captivate you. We're talking about Bobby Heenan, Jesse Ventura. Roddy Piper's just up there with the mouth that can get you in trouble. And it's unfortunate that we don't have any more guys like that.
Yeah, and of course, our condolences does go out.
Let me go ahead and address one of my feuds that I clearly remember with Roddy Piper from back in the day. I wonder if a lot of people can remember this. It was a briefly done feud, but it was, like I said before, whenever Roddy Piper does something, he does it 200%, and that's the feud he had with Bad News Brown for WrestleMania. I think it was either 5 or 6, and he adopted the persona of the Hot Scott, where he actually painted up half of his body black to represent the half Scot persona for Bad News Brown, and I don't think they ever had a winner in that match, but they had one hell of a fight.
Another great feud that I remember offhand is, of course, when Roddy Piper came back to the WWE, is his street fight with Goldust.
Oh, the Hollywood Backlot Brawl.
Yeah, and that was phenomenal because back then, that's when Goldust was very, very erotic in his rare form. Of course, this is back in the Attitude Era, and I remember Roddy saying, you know, he was like really freaked out by Goldust. Just the chemistry that they had was absolutely incredible. Lance, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that actually comes to my mind is from back in the old Coliseum home video days. I don't know how many of y'all remember those.
I remember.
But I remember when he fought Bret the Hitman Hart over the Intercontinental title. Those matches were just freaking excellent. And I also remember the Bad News Brown feud. Of course, I was also listening to some Piper's podcast from early this morning, and he brought that up with, I think, Ronda Rousey. I just still can't believe he's gone.
Yeah. Again, I think we are all floored and in shock of the passing of the legendary Roddy Piper, WWE Hall of Famer. It's still very surreal of his passing. One of the other things that I do remember, it was one of his Piper's Pits, and it was a return of a Piper Pit, and he had a celebrity on there, and I forget the guy's name.
Martin Downey Jr.
And I remember how he kept on blowing the cigar. Roddy's. It was a WrestleMania. I'm not sure which one. For those of you listening, forgive me, my history's not that great.
If I were to guess, I would say I would think 6 because it happened at
it was on WrestleMania 5.
It was 5. Okay.
Yeah, one of Trump at the Trump Plaza, I believe. I think, or something like
Correct.
that.
That was when the Mega Powers exploded, and that was Roddy's grand return.
Yeah, and, you know, the fact that he just took that fire extinguisher and blew it right in Junior's face, Downey Jr.'s face, was, I couldn't stop laughing, and that's just his personality and his persona. And I think, you know what we're going to do? We're going to wrap things up, but, of course, we want to get some final thoughts from the panel here. Billy, you're over at WGSTV. Some final thoughts.
When you think of Roddy Piper, you think legend. You can't think of anything else other to say than what he's done and what he's accomplished throughout his career. I can also recall some of the things I watched on the documentary that WWE released several years ago regarding his career from his follow-up into the World Wrestling Federation, where he really started to solidify himself and really started to solidify his gimmick and his character. And basically, I don't know if anybody else would agree with it, but this is the way I view it, that basically he was the Attitude Era before the Attitude Era ever happened. And he pulled it off in the 80s, and he did it better than anyone. And, you know, he was one of, I'm not going to say one of the best or the best, but he was one of the best when it came to the interview segments. And like I've already stated before, the creator of the Piper's Pit. And again, there will never be another interview segment to bring as much entertainment and controversy than Piper's Pit.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have Lance Moss over from Lance Moss TV. Lance, your final thoughts.
I mean, when it comes to the Hot Rod, you gotta love him, and you also gotta hate him at the same time. Back in the day, because let's face it, he's one of the few heels that can get enough heat to where they would actually have to send him out to say, let's say he was working with the NWA at the time, they'd have to send him to the AWA for 6 months, so he wouldn't keep getting stabbed during half the shows, and he could get that kind of heat. Honestly, he's going to be sorely missed.
Absolutely. There will never be another great heel like the Rowdy one, Roddy Piper. And last, we have Joseph Knight from the CWA. He has got a big event coming up down in Boontown, New Jersey, Summer Bash 2. Joe, your final thoughts.
Well, again, you know what? Roddy was one of the true classics. Roddy was one of the best, and I know us in the CWA will greatly miss him. I got to say that. that promotion in heaven is looking a lot better than what we got down here. Roddy, you'll be missed but never forgotten.
Absolutely.
I think now he can continue his feud with Macho Man Randy Savage up there.
And
Yeah,
Sherry and, oh, geez, with Andre. I mean, the list of Blue Piper annoyed.
Wait, can I tell you a little funny story about the whole reason why he kept the blackface, the black, half black gimmick going so long?
Sure.
The actual, it was supposed to have a clear fluid, but Andre and somebody else threw the clear solution out and just put water in there. That's why he was stuck half black for as long as he was.
Oh,
wow.
Yeah, and I remember the story. He actually had to walk through the airport painted half black and half white.
That I did not know. Wow.
I just learned that this morning.
Yeah, classic. And once again, Rowdy, we love you. We're going to miss you. Rest in peace, and God be with you on your journey. But again, we're going to wrap it up here. And for everyone here, I am your hardcore host, Brickhead. So please make sure you put your comments in the comment section below and follow us over at Facebook.com/Hardcore Wrestling Radio. And please take 5 seconds out and subscribe to us over at YouTube.com/HWRShow. So for everyone here, I am your hardcore host, Brickhead, saying we'll see you when we see you.